Good morning. How are we? Great to see you all today. Just wanted to let you know that every time I come to this part of Texas and get to be with you, I always have like a bucket list experience. So I've shared with you in the past, I've done the Buc-ee's thing. I'm over it, but it's good. It's cool. But last night I did something really cool. So last night I went to dinner with some of your pastoral team, and first of all, I was in downtown Canton, which was a bucket lister. And then, secondly, we were having oysters in downtown Canton with country music playing in the background. I don't think I would have guessed those three combos would have gone together, but I never know what I'm going to experience when I come. It's so great. And just watching as Adam was running you through these highlights, I don't know if you guys quite get it because you're in it. But because of my ability to sort of be alongside your team, but also be a little bit of a distance, you guys need to understand, and the other churches that I get to interact with, it is a season right now where God is really using Radiant. And that is something to be held really closely and feel great about, but also to be not cautious about, but to be stewarding of. And so just to be able to see the transformation and the generosity and the resources. And what's really cool is like, we're not done. Right? Like we're not done. And so we get to see what God is doing in the future. And I'm so glad to be alongside. Well, you can't really see this. It's here. You'll see it here in a minute. I asked Dan this week to get me a treadmill. And I thought he was going to get me like a treadmill. And he got me this. All right? This must be his idea of exercise. So this is what Dan got me. And I appreciate it so much. It's a walking treadmill. But it's kind of the focal point of our conversation this morning, because it's going to represent the journey of life that we all are on and how the treadmill of life. And I thought it'd be cool to have somebody kind of demonstrate for it, because some of you, you're not familiar with a treadmill. It's been a while. Some of you are, and it's like a torture device for you. So I was gonna think, I thought maybe Adam should come help me a little bit this morning and jump on the treadmill, help him out, right? So we got it, let me make sure I got it turned on here. Oh, did it? All right, it's good. So I'm gonna get you don't get to talk, just walk. Okay, I know, it's not your turn now, all right? All right, you go ahead and get on there. It's gonna go slow because I'm gonna keep it slow. So here, I'll plus it just a little, just so you're not falling off walking so slow. So let's keep it there. So remember, this is life, okay? So many of us, this is the speed of life we love. This is the speed of life that we yearn for. Maybe this morning was like that. Slow morning, it's raining, kind of chilling, you're drinking your coffee. Like, this is cool, right? Like, it's nice. It's not bad. Now, the reality is we think we like that as I cough. But the reality is we're not really living at this pace, right? And so what we know is going to happen is eventually life is going to pick up. I'm hitting the plus, all right? Ooh, I can do it from over here. Look at that, all right? So we're picking up, and so, oh, there you go, all right. There you go. So so this is what happens. Like maybe you have a child. Maybe you have two children and it gets introduced into your life. Maybe you get a new job. Maybe your boss is calling you on weekends and things start speeding a little more. Things start, how's that?
I don't think we went this fast in the first service.
We didn't, but you're warmed up.
Okay, yeah.
So things are kind of cooking a little bit, and maybe some of you walked out of your week and this is what your week looked like. Like this was kind of the pace thing. Thank you, sir. This is kind of the pace thing that you were all about. How's that feeling? Good? Heart rate's going up, right? Now, listen, this is reality. Now, we don't have the ability on this particular walking treadmill, but as Adam's walking, you also know that a lot of treadmills have another feature. And the other feature is what? Incline, right? So your heart rate's going now, but imagine if we could raise the incline. I'm gonna slow it down a little bit for you, okay? All right, you good? Imagine if we lift that. Now, we know that life includes a lot of these terrain changes as well as speed changes. So there's times where it feels like we're going downhill and we're cruising, but a lot of times life is a lot of uphill moments. And what we often don't realize is that as much as we love or desire the downhill parts of life, it's the uphill parts of life that actually is where we change and where we transform, or where the things significant. Think about the things in your life that you're most proud of. Maybe you started a business or something, or maybe you graduated and you got a degree. That was kind of uphill time. Maybe you're parenting a toddler right now. That's some uphill moments. Maybe you're parenting a teenager right now. that you're doing both. That's some uphill moments, right, that you've got going on. Maybe you're married and you're still married. That's some uphill moments. And so, it goes fast, right? And it goes slow, and it goes in all those things. Here's the challenge. As life does its thing, especially this and that, and fast and slow, at some point we start getting potentially weary, or we start getting frustrated, or we start getting fed up that we feel like maybe we're doing what Adam's doing. We're moving, but we're not moving anywhere. It doesn't feel like we're actually making progress. And at that moment, the largest temptation that we all face, stand by, is that, this one doesn't stop that fast, right? It's kind of slow, but is that we're just gonna hit that big red stop button. Thank you, by the way. You can leave now. We're gonna hit that big red, like if life, he did great. If life had this big red stop button, we would hit it, right? We would eject, we would disconnect, we would be out, right? We would be tempted to just tap out. And these are the moments this is the moment where this singular trait is so important that we carry with us, especially as followers of Christ. And that is that we would be people who would exhibit and declare in our life that we are going to live with grit. With grit. And I would add a second word to that, not just grit, but a gritty faith. A gritty faith. Now the problem is, before we step into the idea of what is grit, I want to talk to us for a moment about this idea of faith. Because faith can get very confusing. Part of our problem is that we have maybe a misconception or a misrepresentation of what faith looks like. Like maybe you watched the Grammys last week. I know that I'm getting older because I had no idea what any of that music was that was happening. And when Beyonce wins Country Album of the Year, we're all doomed. Okay. But you watch the pre-show, the Grammys, the Oscars, and what do you see? You see these famous celebrities, and they're walking the red carpet. A lot of us believe that if I'm a person of faith, that's sort of what my spiritual life is going to look like. I'm going to be completely put together all the time. I'm going to be without a blemish. I'm just going to walk in front, and they're going to be like, wow, they are just tight with God. Like, you're just going to look like you're walking the red carpet of life. Your treadmill is just going to be smooth and steady all the time, not a hair out of place or a zit on the face. You're just going to be perfect, right? But the reality is, to live as a person of faith looks a lot more like a parent at 7 a.m. on a Monday morning with 2 young kids trying to get them to school. Right? It's chaos, but it's controlled. There's a sense of confidence, but there's also a sense of it's about to go off the edge. All of that is true. We're frazzled at times, but we're remaining faithful. That's actually what faith really looks like, because authentic faith means that we have been through some fire. We have weathered some storms. We're pressing in. Maybe we've even experienced a doubt or two. Maybe we've even prayed a few prayers we'd be a little embarrassed to talk about, where we've kind of raised our fist at God, raised some questions with God, started to ask as you walk the treadmill of life, why is this true in my life? And those moments, I would argue, are not a sign of a lack of faith. They're actually an indicator of a gritty faith. Because gritty faith is not red carpet polished or perfect in our belief. It's faith that endures even when the illness doesn't go away. It's faith that endures when finances continue to be hard. It's faith when your marriage struggles seem like they are just never gonna end. It is faith that requires grit. And the Apostle Paul, he embodies this. If there was ever the poster child for gritty faith, it's the Apostle Paul. Here's what he writes. He says, "We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. We are persecuted, but not abandoned. We are struck down, but not destroyed." If you didn't catch that, Paul is not just having a bad day. He's using some words. He's saying, I am getting crushed over here, God. I'm down on my luck. He's saying, I am confused, I'm perplexed. That's that doubt, questioning thing. He's saying, I'm getting knocked down. This is not words that speak of a life without struggle and without a grind, but it's also a life in which struggle does not get the final word because Paul is determined to live a gritty faith. And Jesus also modeled this in his ministry and with the words that he left for us, which would probably be wise for us to remember. He never promised us an easy road. Instead, he said, in this world, you will have a great time always. In this world, everything will be easy. In this world, you'll always be fed and full and happy, content. That's not what he said. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart because I have overcome the world. And if faith has often been misrepresented, the writer of Hebrews gives us what I think is a clear picture. And the writer of Hebrews allows us, with faith, to sit in this tension. I love tension. Because I think that tension is healthy for us, and a lot of life is that. Like, we like clear, concrete answers, but a lot of it is this nuanced tension that we have to live in. So the writer of Hebrews talks about what faith is, and here's the picture that's painted. The writer says, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. In other words, this is amazing imagery. It's this tension over here of this confidence and hope, just opposed against this idea of what's over here, what's coming, I actually still don't see. I don't have certainty. I only have confidence and hope over here. That's a tension that's hard for many of us. But that's the picture of faith that is painted. That faith is not complete certainty, but it's this confident pursuit of this mystery that he writes about, of these things we have not yet seen. Now, David Brooks, back in December, wrote this incredible article in the New York Times, and he discussed his ongoing journey of faith in God. Go back and Google it if you can find it. He discusses this tension that he has in his relationship with God, and he doesn't use the word grit in his writing, but I think what he describes so kind of gives us a picture of what the writer of Hebrews is talking about in real life. He said this. He said, I experience faith as a yearning for something beautiful, right here, confidence and hope, that I can sense but not fully grasp, that which I cannot yet see. He goes on to say, for me, faith is more about longing and thirsting than knowing and possessing. There is a gritty, longing, yearning aspect to people who are truly walking in faith. Because listen, faith in God is not for the faint of heart. If someone told you that, they are wrong. Requires grit. It's the kind of faith that requires you to charge and move forward even when things are hard or when life starts to point you uphill at times. You have to push on. Here's the picture of grit. So if that's faith, this tension of confidence and hope with things we not see, if we're combining faith with grit, what's grit? Here's the standard definition, and then we'll unpack it a little bit. Grit is this. It's courage and resolve. And it's this trait possessed by individuals, hopefully you and I, who demonstrate passion and perseverance. That word's going to come up here in just a moment. Towards a destination, that things we have not yet seen, despite being confronted with significant obstacles. I was born in the last century, and so some of you were as well. You just haven't dealt with that yet. When I said that, you're like, I guess I was too, okay? It's fine. And some of you will remember this. I don't know if they still do it in like middle school or elementary school, but they used to do this thing a couple times a year. It was like the presidential physical fitness training. Remember, some of you are nodding, right? Every day you would do a different test, like a shuttle run or a one lap around the track. But there's this particular thing they used to do that is scarring, especially for many of you ladies that are in the room as I'm about to describe it, so it's okay. So they would have the day where we would do pull-ups. And so they would go into the gym and all the guys would line up and they would have us get up on the bar and do as many pull-ups as possible. Well, I was this scrawny person, so I knew that I could do the equivalent of 0 pull-ups. But I had learned over the years that if I took a running start when they called my name, that I could get one in from the momentum of jumping up and grabbing the bar. And so I would run and grab the bar and pull myself up, fall down, and never could do another one. But that wasn't the part that's important. The picture I want to paint for you is what they would do to these 11 and 12-year-old girls when it was their turn as a group to go. Because someone decided in their wisdom to not have the ladies actually do pull-ups, but they would actually take the girls and they would lift them up onto the bar and they would grasp the bar. Some of you remember this. And then they would push the girls up to where their chin was over the top of the bar. And then they would release them and they would start the clock. And the whole objective was for these young ladies to hold onto the bar for as long as possible. And the guys would all lean in, all these young guys, and just watch their humiliation. Because as the clock went on, they would start pouring with perspiration. Their muscles would start quaking and they would be shaking, and we would all just start laughing, and they would just keep holding on as long as possible. And the whole objective was for them to not quit, to endure, to not give up. Let me tell you today, that picture of that young lady holding onto the bar, that is not the picture that I wanted to paint for you today. That is what we call just trying as hard as we can to not quit. Grit is way more than that. Grit is way more than that. Quit is passive, but gritty faith is a pursuit. Grit is greater than simply hang on. Now, some of you checked out a little bit ago because you've heard messages, even here or in other places, where, we've talked about it. Don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. And you're like, yeah, I've heard that, done that, tried that. It's not working for me. I want to quit. That's not our conversation today. This is a greater conversation. This isn't a question of quit or not quit. This is actually the question of, are you going to live, exhibit, and declare yourself to be a person of gritty faith? That when things get hard, it's not simply just holding on, but you're actually moving forward. You're going forward. Gritty faith is the courage to persist and to press on even when certainty is elusive. And by the way, gritty faith only has one pace, and that is forward. And I don't know if you know this, but forward is a pace. It may not be fast, but it's a pace. And sometimes when we're living out a gritty life, a life of faith, forward is the only pace we have, and that may be you today. Angela Duckworth, she's a professor and a teacher, and she's got a famous TED Talk because she wrote a book called Grit. And what happened was she used to teach math, and she noticed there were students in her class who were not the smartest, but would do very well in math. And so she started to research, like, what is it that helps people be successful? And so she broadened her research, and what she found is really helpful for you and I, because she ultimately determined that the number one trait that separates successful people from unsuccessful people is not IQ, it's not upbringing, it's not talent. She simply said, it's grit. It's grit. And we know that biblically, right? And so I have good news for you today. Grit can actually be developed. So you're like, I don't feel very gritty. It can be developed. Listen to what James writes about in the New Testament as he talks about this gritty truth. He says this: consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Yay! Because you know that the testing of your faith, those uphill moments, produces perseverance. Remember, that was part of our definition of grit, the perseverant mentality of perseverance. And then James says this, catch this: let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. How does grit become a reality? James says it's something that we can develop and exhibit, that we can process through it. In fact, the two Greek words that we translate into English, mature and complete, that you see on the screen, in the Greek, they actually are defined by the idea of it's a gradual and it's an ongoing process. In other words, James is saying maturity and completeness in our faith is not a snap of the fingers thing, but it's a process, and we develop habits, and we determine, and we develop disciplines and priorities that guide us in these gritty moments of our life. So I thought I'd take James's advice, and that all of us could either use a reminder or a kick in the pants that we need to get gritty. So let me give you 3 priorities that I believe will help us live out a gritty faith before we walk out of here today. Here's how we develop a gritty faith. Here's the first one. They're pretty easy to remember, so I hope you'll take them with you today. My encouragement would be, number 1, you prioritize stretching over stagnation. In other words, I'm okay with being pulled a little bit. I'm okay with a little uphill. I'm okay with growth. I don't know if you know this, but comfort kills grit. Comfort kills grit. And when it may be what's happening too when it comes to our faith. It's what author Michael Easter in his book of the same title calls a comfort crisis. And a comfort crisis may be leaking into our churches and, more importantly, into our spiritual lives. Michael Easter goes on, he describes in his book how many ways our lives have become easier. in the last 100 years. He talks about things like the internet, talks about things like cell phones and communication. He talks about things like air conditioning. I'm a fan. All these things, and yet he says, in all of our comfort, we don't seem to be that much happier. That with all the comfort, instead of it stretching us, it's actually made us more stagnant. He goes on to say, if we continue to push discomfort away, things will only get worse. He says we'll grow weaker, stagnant, and frail as we seek happiness and connection through things like junk food and pornography and video games and social media and what he calls other zombie-like activities. They bring comfort, but they don't bring growth. And I find myself probably way too often living with my eyes on comfort questions like, where's the nearest Starbucks? Things like, why is my cell reception so bad in the middle of nowhere? Or my favorite, why is there no Wi-Fi on this airplane that's flying 500 miles an hour at 35,000 feet? Why is it not working? All right? These are the comfort questions I have. You probably have your own. But we recognize that our growth comes from stretching, comes from the hard stuff, stretching us in ways we don't understand. And it's always the things that are most helpful to me. Perhaps I'm going to challenge you. Perhaps we as individuals and as a church need a little bit more of what Michael Easter in his book calls a misogi mentality. Here's what a misogi is. It comes from the Japanese culture. The Japanese culture, on an annual basis, they will challenge themselves through what's called a misogi. And there's only 2 rules to choosing a misogi. Number 1, you choose an activity or a thing or a discipline or just something in the next 12 months that you will tackle. And the 2 rules are, number 1, there has to be a certain percentage of a chance that you will not complete it or finish it. It can't be so easy that you can do it without even thinking. There has to be a chance you will fail in order for it to be a misogi. Rule number 2 is you can't die, which is a good rule. You don't choose something that will risk your life. That's a misogi. And so for some of us today, I would challenge you that stretching is going to come in the next 11 months of this year if you will choose a misogi. Maybe in your spiritual walk, maybe in something physical that you're going to be doing, but God's going to walk with you, something that's going to stretch you. I mean, I might get in trouble today, but some of you saw those statistics, especially around the finances and the resources, and maybe God is giving you a misogi whisper in your ear. Because some of you had the wrong idea. Man, we got lots of money. Why do I have to participate? That's what some of you thought, right? But some of you thought, I'm not up there. I wasn't part of that resourcing, and that's hard, I get it. But as you move forward next year, maybe your misogi and your stretching and your gritty faith is to go, I'm gonna start incrementally participating with my resources. Others of you, your role, your responsibilities as Radiant continues to go forward. I don't know what God will whisper in your ear, but that may be the misogi, and we have to prioritize stretching over stagnation if we want to be people of gritty faith. Here's number 2. Perhaps we should prioritize sharpening over settling. This has to do with the people who are all around you. Some of you, I will challenge you, have settled, and you have people around you that I would call your quit team. When you want to quit, you call them and they encourage you to quit. When you go tomorrow and you go, man, Pastor Lou was talking about this misogi thing. I think I'm going to do this. And they'd be like, what are you doing that for? That sounds hard. You call them and you say, man, I had a rough day or 2 in my marriage. And they're like, you should just leave them. Right? Or you come to church one day and something happens, or somebody have a hard relationship and you go call your friend and like, you should go to a different church. There's lots of churches. You should quit that church. That's a quit team. Some of us, we need to stop settling for a quit team, and we need to rebuild our team. We need to get a new lineup. We need to exit some people, and we need to build a grit team. People that are going to challenge you with empathy when you need it. I think of the picture in Exodus 17. That's such a great picture of this. It's when Moses and the Israelites are fighting the Amalekites in battle. And in the story, for whatever reason, God had determined when Moses would stand on the hill and he would raise his hands, that the Israelites would advance. And when his hands would go down, he would get tired, they would retreat. And eventually, everybody physically runs out of gas, right? And so what happens in the story is they bring a rock and they set Moses down, and Aaron and Hur stand on either side and they hold up his arms. That is a picture of a grit team. What they could have done is said, Moses, I know you're tired. Let's go have lunch. We'll come back and fight another day. They said, no. It's not even about victory. It's about we're next to you on your left and your right, and we will not let you stop. We will not let you retreat. We are your grit team. I love having those people. Adam can be that for me at times, where it's like they're a text. I like to keep them a text away, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm having a day. And I love the people that will go, I appreciate you have a day. They will have empathy, and they'll say, you need to freaking go. Let's go, right? Like they'll have honest conversations with me and keep me moving forward. So you may need to evaluate that. This is your grit team, by the way. Radiant Church in the bigger picture, when you come together, in relationship like you are, we form a grit team as we go out into the community together. So we got to prioritize stretching over stagnation. We got to prioritize really in our lives this sharpening over settling. And here's the last one, that you would prioritize significance over self. Something significant over self. Grit flourishes when we live for something greater than ourselves. And in a time where selfies and self-care and self-improvement are all the rage, it's no wonder that self-obsession and selfishness is an epidemic in our world. If self is our focus, our destination will be shallow and unsatisfying. Here's the principle of this found in one of the most powerful verses in Scripture. Here's what Paul says. He says, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim, the only significant thing, Paul says, that I have is to finish the race and complete the task that Jesus has given me, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace. That's significant. And Paul had been shipwrecked, he had been betrayed, he'd been sick and beaten. Talk about grit. That was Paul. And there's this one small verse that you're reading, one small phrase in this verse that so many people miss, and it's the power principle of grit and perseverance. It's when Paul says, my life is worth nothing to me. Translation, he wasn't on the treadmill for himself. He wasn't living his life for himself. His life wasn't about him. His only work and assignment was what God had given for him. And so for many of us, if we're in the quit zone right now and not living in the grit zone, perhaps we aren't running the race that God has for us. Maybe we're running a race of life that's all about us, right? Maybe it's about comfort and net worth and people's opinion, and it's producing way more quit than grit. If you're living for something, I would argue, that the world can give you versus the assignment that God has for you, you are probably living for a finish line that isn't really worth finishing for. And so we need to get on this treadmill of life and begin to move forward in a different way. I think about Jimmy Carter, whatever your politics, he passed away a few weeks ago. You think about Jimmy Carter and his life, and how he went from peanut farmer and he ascended all the way to the most powerful position in the world, right? And then within 4 years, he was voted out of office and he descended back. And yet he could have quit. He could have said, yeah, I did that significant thing and now I'm done. But instead, most of the latter part of his life, post his presidency, is the part that you and I are most aware of. It's the part where he showed gritty faith and he did significant things, probably more significant things than he did 4 years in the most powerful office in the world. Because he was a man of gritty faith. And he understood that I want to do something significant. It's not about me. Now listen, here's the hope. We could say all of this and you could be, I'm gritty. Here's the thing. Gritty faith is not about your strength alone. Yes, you need to prioritize these disciplines, but ultimately it's about us relying on God's strength. It's about relying on him so deeply every day during life's challenges, during the uphill burdens and endurance of our life, and it's drawn from his grace. Here's what Paul writes. He says that Jesus told him, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. You can be gritty because my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. And then Paul says, I will boast then. I'll be pumped about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may rest, may be present, may dwell in me. Listen, we got to recognize there's always going to be struggle, but the presence of his Spirit allows us to have strength and get gritty. Someone here today, God has something significant for you to do if you won't quit, if you will embrace grit. You walked in here today, and you're like, I don't know if I'm doing anything significant. I'm out here in Van Zandt County. No, you don't know. You don't know the conversation you're gonna have. You don't know the child you're gonna raise. You don't know the influence you're gonna have on the job or the classroom that you sit in. You don't know your role here at Radiant that's gonna project someone into the kingdom of God. Stop selling yourself short. But you'll never know if you don't show grit. Now, some of you walked in here today and you're on the edge of quit. Maybe you already did. Walked in and you're about to quit sobriety. You're about to quit your marriage. You're about to quit on your family, quit that job and move on to something else. Quit the church, quit your faith. And God wants you to know, no, it's not about quit. It's about grit. That this is the moment where you need to get gritty in your life and stretch and not break and sharpen and not settle. Get a grit team around you and look for something more significant. And here's the thing as we close. I gotta be real with you. Whenever we do something where we declare it, right? A resolution, a declaration, something we're gonna change. And hopefully every week we come in here and there's a bit of sense of that. We don't just sing songs, but we redeclare where our faith is. We listen, we're challenged by God's word. And hopefully we walk into the parking lot and we're like, okay, something's different, something's changed slightly. If we're just coming in here and going through the motions, we gotta change that. But here's what I want to tell you. Sometimes we think that if we start into these disciplines or habits or this godly grit mindset, that everything's just going to change overnight. Let me give you a reality check. It's a graph. I love a good graph. Here's guys up there. Put this. Yep, there it is. So here's the two timelines that we think about. On the bottom, we think about time, and on the side, you think about progress. So if you think about something new that you do, there's progress. And we think about we're gonna make more progress over time, right? So when you start to diet, let's just go there, okay? Right? You go low carb for a few weeks, right? And you're like, man, I get on the scale and I'm down 5 pounds. This is amazing, right? So we think this is gonna happen. Keep going, guys, one more. So we think this is gonna happen, right? If I just keep never eating bread again for the rest of my life, that I'm gonna just keep losing 5 pounds a week forever. Now, first of all, when you get to heaven, God's gonna say, man, bread is good, and you missed out, okay? So a grilled cheese is godly, okay? But we think, so sometimes you listen to me today, you're like, gritty faith, and I'm just gonna go, and I'm gonna be gritty, and I'm gonna find something significant, and I love that, but I wanna warn you, we think this is what our life is gonna look like that. But here's the reality, whenever we introduce change or transformation, this is what it really looks like. Is that, yeah, we get a little bit of a pop maybe, we get a little bit inspiration, right? But then the actual timeline, there's a dip before we actually see progress. And there's a word for that little space right there. We call that the valley of disappointment. Some of you know what I'm talking about when it comes to things in your life, right? It's that moment where you give up on that habit. You go back to your old ways of doing things. You give up on your faith because it gets uphill hard or fast. And here's the thing. What's sad about that is what they've learned is the valley of disappointment always happens right before the greatest progress. And it's the part of our lives where we tend to always quit. And we miss out on what was just about to come, because we get stuck in the valley of disappointment and we quit. And my word to you that we'll close with today is, this is where grit is the fuel. With God strengthening you, grit is the faith fuel that will drive you through the valley of disappointment to whatever expectation, whatever thing significantly that God has for you in the future, that we can trust Him that is gonna play out in our lives. So as we close, here's what I wanna do. I want you to stand with me. We're gonna pray. And I want to just pray over you. And we have some folks that are always up here in the front. And if you folks want to come and be here, because today I'm going to give you, in just a moment, I'm going to pray. And you're going to head out and go get your brisket and all that stuff that you got fired up and going. Okay? Man, I hope the Chiefs lose. I'm sorry, bro. We're just over it, bro. We're over it. Oh, Patrick, don't hit him. Oh, you might hurt him. Sorry, bro. I love you. I love you. Okay. Here's the thing. These folks are here because some of you need to come this direction before you go that direction. Because today you're on the edge of some stuff and you just need somebody just to agree with you in prayer for the grit that you need through this week. That God will just carry you through that, okay? So I'm gonna pray that over all of us because we can all use it. But specifically, if you need prayer today before you head out and we enjoy the big game today, would you just come and allow these folks to pray with you? Let's pray. Father, we're just so grateful right now for your Spirit. and just your hand in and upon us. God, thank you for this church, for the place that it is become and is becoming. That so many of us, God, have been impacted. We have hope and change and transformation. God, I pray that through the hard pieces and parts of our lives, God, that you would recommit us to declare and exhibit godly grit. God, if we got to reset our team, help us to do it. God, if we are to be gritty for others, help us to do it. God, if you have something significant, reveal it to us. We know you do. God, we're grateful. Let this week be a season where we display gritty faith in our lives. God, we're grateful. We ask it in your name. Amen. God bless you. Have a great day.